Today on Words and Numbers, adults ordering from the kids menu,
normalizing political discussion,
First Amendment and related issues,
and the government purchases 10% of Intel.
All this and more on Words and Numbers.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
Words and Numbers is a Civil original podcast. Find out more at civil.com. That's CIVL.com. Ant, what's new and exciting in your world this week?
We got an email from listener Michael Jensen, who asks, what's your practical advice for making a difference in society? Though I enjoy your podcast, I often find myself feeling despondent and powerless afterwards. I like your recent So What segment, so do we, but sometimes your advice seems too out of reach to be practical to an everyday citizen. All right, I think there's a good approach here, and I call it normalizing political discussion. And this is maybe not what people are looking for, because when people ask me, all right, so what do we do about this? I get the sense that they're asking for, like, unicorns of here's a magic wand and we can make the problem go away.
They want a magic bullet.
Yeah. And, those things don't exist. Now, from time to time, there are relatively simple solutions, but that's not something. Yeah, well, yeah, that's not something an individual can do anything about. But nonetheless,
that's right.
I'm going to argue here that what we need to do is normalize political discussion. We've gotten to the point that we can't talk about things political. Either you're talking to people who agree with you 100%, in which case there's no point in the discussion, or you're talking to people who disagree with you to some extent, and that ends up pretty badly, depending on who the other
almost
person
every
is.
time. I spent a lot of time thinking about this question, because really what's happened is most of our interpersonal communications are now happening in an impersonal way.
Right.
So we're online a lot, and online, our little universes are actually echo chambers.
Mm-hmm.
You end up, the algorithms spit out people that are more or less slightly different versions of you.
Right. Yes.
And you end up only hearing things that you pretty much agree with until they spit out your antithesis. Mm-hmm. At which point you say, this person is so crazy because look at all these other people who all are sensible. And then there's this one lunatic. And they tear into these people like a monkey on a cupcake. And nothing good ever comes of it. It's because we're in echo chambers. And we live, I wrote a pretty good article about this a long time ago, claiming that we live now in a boutique culture, right? That we create our own little boutique cultures, and we don't interact with each other nearly enough. And then when you're confronted with somebody who doesn't agree with you at all, you don't know what to do with them.
Right. Yes. Yeah. You don't know how to handle it. And I think part of I agree with everything you said. I think in addition to that, part of the problem is we tend to focus our attention so much on what we want to say that we don't listen to what the other person is saying. And so often we end up talking past each other because nobody's listening, just everybody's talking. So let me throw out an example here. Suppose let's take a concrete case of a discussion on minimum wage, and somebody's arguing to you that there should be a minimum wage. Now, the knee-jerk reaction is to say, no, there shouldn't. Maybe even to become indignant and to say, well, it's my money. If I'm the employer, I have the right to contract with whoever I have the right to contract with. Let me suggest an alternate approach to these things that employs the listening. And that is, first, hear what the person is actually saying, not what you imagine that the person is saying. And it helps to ask for clarification. So, you might ask, and don't ask it in an accusatory sense, but in actual, you're seeking information. This minimum wage that you're discussing, should it apply to everybody? Should there be any exceptions? What about the mentally ill, this sort of thing? Once you're clear that you understand what the person's saying, I suggest taking the person down a path, and do it gently, of consequences. And don't do it, as we so often do, as a statement of, well, if you have a minimum wage, the following things will happen. Ask instead, okay, what about this? Your minimum wage, as you imagine it, gets instituted. What happens, for example, with children of affluent households who currently, they're in an affluent household, they don't need to work, they've got plenty of money, but you push the minimum wage up high enough that it becomes interesting for them. And so now they look to move into the job market. What sorts of effects do you see this having? Again, not accusatory of it's going to have the following effects, but ask the person, walk the person through. And I think you achieve by doing that a couple things. One, you may actually encounter something you have overlooked that's valuable. Two, you engender goodwill. The person is not going to feel necessarily that you're attacking, but that you're actually looking for information. And three, the person, if there are errors in his thinking, the person's more likely to find them on his own if you walk down this path than if you try and beat him over the head with it. So that's for what it's worth, Michael, that's my advice on how to normalize political discussion.
Yeah, I've seen Antony, God help us all, argue, and I use the word argue the way it should be used, argue with lunatics over all kinds of things, and he is remarkably patient. Follow me on Twitter for counterexamples. And let's move on. Unless Michael Jensen is the Michael Jensen I once worked with in the great state of Utah. And if so, nice to hear from you. And if not, there are two Michael Jensens probably listening to this right now.
Get Words and Numbers on Civil.com and on Civil's TV and mobile apps. Regular episodes are free. Sign up for an annual membership to support our show and for access to member-exclusive content.
I want to talk about something a little weirder, but maybe related in some obscure way. Nearly 50% of Americans, when they go out to eat, are now ordering from the children's menu.
Really?
50%.
Are they looking for lesser portions or lesser prices?
Apparently both. Apparently both. The move in restaurants to serve tremendous portions has made Americans fatter than they need to be. So, and anybody who's gone to another country in order to meal out knows that the portion sizes elsewhere are considerably smaller than they are here. But it's also a monetary thing. When people go out, it's expensive. And I remember, when my 3 children were small and we wanted to go out, man, I couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
There was no way. And you had 6 kids, for the love of God.
Yeah, that's not happening.
And the only option we had was going out for pizza, which one relatively inexpensive thing could feed all of us, right? So I'm sensitive to both sides of this argument. I'm just interested to see where it ends up. Is it going to have a ripple effect? Will restaurants realize that they're A, serving too much, and B, charging too much? Or will we just continue down this path, which actually answers the question that people are having? Can I afford to go out? Do I want to eat that much? Well, yes, and I don't have to. And that's interesting. Anyway, that, of course, brings us to the foolishness of the week. And we're going to have to retire Donald Trump pretty soon. It's just not fair.
He's the gift that keeps on giving.
There's never any competition. And it's so bad this time that he's done 2 things that qualify as the foolishness of the week. But we start with him threatening to revoke the licenses of ABC and NBC, the networks.
Yeah.
Because fake news.
Well, he's going to be okay. So we got 2 issues here. One is the revoking of the licenses.
We got
2 is
more
the
than,
rationale.
We got more than 2 issues here. Trust me when I tell you.
Yeah, I'm not sure we want a president deciding what's fake.
First, and somebody in Donald Trump's orbit should tell him the FCC doesn't license networks. Sorry.
Does it not?
No,
it licenses
channels.
broadcasting. Yes, yes.
It licenses individual channels. So all the channels under the network banner are licensed, but the network isn't.
Yeah,
so claiming you're going to revoke NBC's license, but it doesn't have one.
Right, right. And more than that, it's not the channel in the modern sense, right? It's the old style, because there was the old style when it went over the radio waves. There was only a limited bandwidth.
Different rules apply to cable, but let's just leave that off to the side for the purposes of what we've got on our plate today.
Is anybody thinking about the First Amendment here?
Well, we'll get there, but let's keep with the technicalities for a minute. The president doesn't have this authority. He can't just wave a magic wand and delicense a single television channel. That happens through the FCC, and the FCC, I believe, is a board of governors of 5, and they're all nominated by the president, but it's under the control of Congress.
I see. FCC is a congressional entity. I see. Yeah.
There's another level of nonsense that can't happen. Now we can talk about the First Amendment, because the president has nothing to say about the news on any channel or how that channel decides to present the news.
Right.
Now, some channels do it much better than others. We often talk about newspapers and websites. We tend not to talk about TV that much because it's such a wasteland. But these channels are allowed to do whatever they want. And under the First Amendment, they're utterly protected.
And I think that's wise. I'm not a fan of fake news. I mean, trust me, as an economist, I hear all sorts of fake news all the time. But the antidote to fake news is more news. It's not less news. Less news is just going to empower the people to disseminate fake news.
And this is really horrifying, because really what's happening is the president doesn't like being criticized, and he's going to silence the critics. But he doesn't have that right, not in a constitutional republic. We have the right to criticize him any damn way we feel like it whenever we want. And he's just got to live with that. It's the downside of achieving the highest office in the land.
Do you think this is one of these things that he does from time to time, of throwing out something that he really doesn't intend to do anything with, just to attract people's attention?
He's extorted a fair amount of money from CBS already. They paid him, I think, $15 million it was, just to get him to go away over the editing of Kamala Harris's 60 Minutes interview.
He claimed that they edited, a private citizen.
No, it was working as president. It was after the fact. And he got them to donate money to his special thing, whatever. And it was a lot of money to get him to just shut up and go away. And he's going to try to continue doing that.
But he won the election. What does he care?
Well, CBS disgraced him somehow by making Kamala Harris look better.
Wow.
By editing. Yeah, I mean, it's like this. It's crazy. But it's not the craziest attack on the First Amendment that we've seen in the last couple of days.
You're going to talk about flag burning?
I thought you would.
Yeah.
But I will too.
I saw this. Actually, I saw it a couple days ago and dismissed it. I thought there's no way this is correct. And then I saw it again, that he's looking to how should I don't even know what the right words are. I was going to say make flag burning illegal, but he can't do that. Only Congress can do that. Nonetheless,
Congress can't do that.
Oh, because it's unconstitutional, right? Yeah.
But yeah, let me just kind of lay out the reality that we deal with here. In 1989, there's a Supreme Court case called Texas versus Johnson, and in a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court rightly held that flag burning is political expression and covered by the First Amendment. Congress, seizing an opportunity, decided, now we can get in on this. And instead of trying to legislate flag burning, they tried to legislate flag desecration. So the Supreme Court ruled in 1989. Congress comes back in 1990 with this nonsense. And the Supreme Court, in a case that nobody ever talks about, United States versus Eichmann in 1990, said, no, you can't do that either.
Yep.
So
Now,
we don't have one case, we have two.
Let me say something here. This is going to hopefully throw the listeners off. I am 100% against desecrating the flag. Absolutely, positively, hands down, 100% against desecrating the flag. And I am 100% against laws that make it illegal to desecrate the flag. Why? Because, in my mind, what the flag stands for, the United States, our Constitution, our way of life, it is a far greater desecration of that symbol to quash the free speech that the desecration represents than it is to desecrate the object.
You have just laid out the Supreme Court's argument in Texas v. Johnson. It's exactly what they came up with, right? Stripped of all the legal niceties. And I would say the same thing. Let me say it completely differently. I don't want to listen to people spouting off Marxist drivel. I don't want to hear it. There's no way in hell I would outlaw it. You can't. It's protected. If it's a bad idea, we won't listen. It's a bad idea, and we've never listened.
Yeah.
There you go. So we've got Donald Trump essentially having a two-front war against the First Amendment. Shame on him and shame on everybody who helps him.
I want to pick on something else about this flag desecration business. If I read it correctly, he's signing some executive order that makes it a felony with 1 year prison. 1 year in prison. You know how many people are going to spend a year? Only Congress has that authority.
0 people will spend 0 days in prison over this.
Tell me this. I mean, the man is not stupid, right? I mean, I think it's too easy to just write it off as being stupid. Is it possible that he's just pushing as hard as he can to see what gives?
I think so. I think that's his game. I think he does it on every front. He's trying to amass more power, and you amass more power by convincing the people that you need it, and you convince people that you need it by doing things, by appealing to their prejudices. And he's a master at that. He's not stupid. But this is the foolishness of the week without question.
Words and Numbers is part of the Civil Network. Civil is a streaming platform dedicated to upgrading civilization by exploring better ways for people to organize, innovate, and thrive. At Civil, we believe that societies flourish when their members honor the civic equality of all people and engage with one another through cooperation. Civil seeks great minds from around the world to share bold ideas for fostering healthy, dynamic societies. By creating space for honest disagreement among people who share a commitment to building a better future, Civil offers a refreshing alternative to divisive punditry and insular echo chambers. Words and Numbers is freely available, but those who subscribe to Civil will access exclusive content, including regular live streams and conversations with remarkable people who are working to build a better society. For more information and to subscribe, visit civil.com. That's CIVL.com. Use the code Words and Numbers, that's one word, for 50% off an annual subscription.
Anyway, what could also have been the foolishness of the week is the United States government taking a 10% interest in Intel, the chip company.
What is with that?
What in God's green earth is going on?
I don't know anything about the legalities as to whether this is legal for the federal government to purchase stock in a company.
Well, but let me throw something onto the fire to maybe get to the heart of that question. What about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac?
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are a little bit different. Firstly, they're government-sponsored entities. So think of it as a corporation that the federal government created. And they loan money for people who are looking to buy houses, which there's lots of pieces there that seem to me to be very different than the government going out and purchasing shares in a private company.
Well, no, Intel is a public company.
Yeah, I meant private in the sense of non-governmental.
Private ownership, I see. But can't I buy shares in Fannie and Freddie?
You can, yeah. But
so there is a rough analog here.
Well, yeah, except that the causality goes the other direction. It's not that Fannie and Freddie existed and the government bought ownership. The government actually created Fannie and Freddie.
I get it, but there's a rough analog, right? The government can in fact own shares in publicly traded companies.
Yeah, own shares is one thing. Purchase them is something else.
I don't think these shares were purchased, Ant. I think they were kind of extorted.
Well, okay, whatever the motivation was behind it, it was...
I don't think the government paid anything for the shares.
You know what? I'm looking at my notes here. I've got the various details, but not that.
I would bet most of the items in this room, and this is my favorite room and all my favorite items, that the government got these shares at no cost.
I don't know that Intel may run afoul of its fiduciary responsibility to the existing stockholders.
Or it could say, by giving the government these shares, we are going to get these government grants and we'll all be richer.
Possibly, yeah. Here's my problem. My problem is actually further downstream than just the government purchasing shares in Intel. In a very broad sense, this smacks of socialism. You know, people say, well, the U.S. isn't a socialist system or whatever, and it's not a socialist system. In fact, many of the countries we point to and say they're socialist systems aren't socialist systems. What makes you a socialist system is that the government owns the means of production. And that's
exactly right. That's exactly
what's going on here, right? So that's at a high level, that's my first problem. At a practical level, this opens a door we absolutely do not want to open. What happens when some years down the road, it becomes common for the government to acquire shares in various companies? And when it does so, the stock prices of those companies will rise. In fact, I have one of my notes here is that when this deal was announced, Intel's stock price jumped 5%.
Well, of course it did, because now what are the odds that Intel is going to fail?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
No matter what it does, right?
Right.
And if I own a company, I might want a sovereign nation to take 10% ownership. And I looked it up. I was wrong. The government paid $8.9 billion for the shares. Let me read to you the exact piece that applies here. The U.S. government paid for a stake in Intel shares with an $8.9 billion investment of common stock funded by previously awarded but unspent grants from the CHIPS and Science Act and Secure Enclave program. And for grants already given, the federal government took a 10% interest in the company.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Now,
so my question is a downstream question too. If this is perfectly acceptable, why not a 10% stake in the S&P 500 more broadly?
Right. Yes. And then notice what happens. You've got the government putting its finger on the scale.
Yes.
And so how do I make an informed investment decision when I look at stock prices? Because the stock prices now are all polluted by the government having done and the possibility of it doing again in the future, intervening.
Because, and people lose sight of this economic fact quite quickly, a stock price is simply information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's information about everybody's opinion about everything that a company is doing. That's what a stock price is.
Now, well, a good counterexample to this is, people understand that prices of things in hospitals, the aspirin, the bedpan, whatever it is, they're meaningless. And they're meaningless in large part because of this phenomenon that governments, regulators, insurers have gotten in there, and now the price no longer reflects the reality of the thing. It's just some arbitrary number in a book somewhere. We don't want that to happen with stocks.
When I'm in a hospital, and I have been, and they say, do you want an aspirin? I say no.
Right. That's $40.
That's going to be another $40 on my bill, and they're going to come back in 4 hours with another aspirin, right?
Right.
Yeah. And a couple of things come directly into my mind when I start thinking about this. First, I would be very worried if I were a shareholder or an employee of another chip company.
Right. AMD, for example, a competitor
For
to
example,
Intel.
I would also be reticent to start a new chip company.
And let me hit that first one first. Think about the incentives for AMD, Intel's competitor. Up until this point, the way that AMD and Intel have competed is to bring better chips to the market at lower prices to attract the consumer.
And they've done a pretty good job of it.
They have.
It's
and they've
worked
been
pretty well.
Focused on what do consumers want, what are consumers willing to pay. I guarantee you, what is the CEO of AMD doing tonight? He's thinking about how he can attract not consumers, but politicians, because the government has opened its wallet.
Because if this is the game we're going to play, then you can bet that people will play it.
Right.
And the second thing, so that was my first knee-jerk response. My second knee-jerk response is, now I don't want to buy a computer with Intel chips.
Now, how interesting. So let me go back to Michael Jensen's original question. What can we do? I'm going to jump ahead with the so what segment. I'll give you an introduction here. One thing to do is stop buying things with Intel chips. Send a very clear signal to Intel that we, the consumers, do not approve of this.
Well, I don't know if it's going to work or not. I'm just loath to support this sort of thing. And look, every now and then, a company does something that's just so ridiculous that I don't want to buy their products anymore.
Right. Right.
And it takes quite a bit, right? Because when Ben & Jerry's was run by Ben and Jerry, two complete and total commies, they made the best ice cream I ever ate, and I bought it every time. And if they wanted to take my money and use it for their ridiculous causes that I disagreed with most of the time, some I didn't, most I did, well, go ahead. I gave it to you. But there are other companies that I don't want to hear it. And Union Carbide pissed me off pretty hard once. Nestle got under my skin a bit, right, in the past. And I just don't want to buy their products, period. And that sentiment lasts. It's hard to get past that sentiment.
Right.
When Pepsi disallowed, I forget where it was a small island nation, maybe the Philippines. They had a contest where you got a number under your bottle cap. And if you got the winning number, you got like $50,000. And there was a glitch, and almost everybody in the entire country got the number, and they didn't pay. And I'll tell you, if I were a Pepsi drinker, I would have stopped, because that's bullshit.
And I don't want to let Intel off the hook here. Intel's got no business doing this. However, in Intel's defense, the greater evil is the government, because if Intel did do the moral thing and say, don't want to have anything to do with this, if you want to give us grants to do research, fine. If you want to loan us money that we pay back, that we can invest in research, maybe. But to take ownership in the company, if Intel were to say, no, we disagree with this, the problem doesn't go away. It's still there. The problem is the government is sticking its nose into corporations. It's doing this. If you don't stop it at the politician level, the thing's not going to end.
And it's not going to end. I can guarantee you it's not going to end, because that first step, that's the hard one. And it seemed to go through without a whole lot of fuss.
Let me tell you, I have a suspicion as to why. Now, one of the articles I was reading said that this is a first step to establishing a national wealth sovereign fund, which I'd not heard the term before, but my quick Googling indicated that a national wealth sovereign fund is pretty much just that. It's the government having savings that is invested in companies, bonds, this sort of thing. Now, it raises the question, why would the U.S. government be looking to set up a national wealth sovereign fund? One possibility is that this is a precursor to some sort of privatization of Social Security.
Yeah, maybe.
We have said,
my initial question is a very different one. Why on earth are you doing this if we have so much money?
Why aren't you
that we're
paying down the debt?
accumulating debt?
Right, yes.
We're not. It's not that we're not paying it. We're accumulating more.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're not at some baseline where we're not adding to it.
Right.
It gets worse literally every day, except for June, as we pointed out.
Except for June, where it gets a little bit better, then gets a lot worse in July.
Like on the head of a pin, the angels danced, but then in July we were back in business. Why on earth are we doing this if we are simultaneously running up the debt? That makes no sense whatsoever. And maybe the rejoinder is, well, we pay 4% on the debt, but we can make 8% on the investments.
Well,
and if we do it long enough over time, we can use the growth in the investments to pay off the debt. Now, that first part might be correct, but it will never be used to pay off the debt.
Yeah, there's the problem.
Because
the problem.
politicians.
Yeah. Now, let me go back to the Social Security thing for a moment, because you and I have argued in the past and continue to argue that the solution to the Social Security insolvency problem is to let taxpayers who are paying into Social Security have that money go into the stock market instead of into treasuries, where it earns a paltry 3 or 4%. Now, there's a big difference between the taxpayer directing the Social Security taxes to the stock market and the government taking the pile of Social Security revenues and investing in the stock market. And the difference is the answer to the question, who controls what it's invested in? If I, the taxpayer, get to control that my Social Security tax money goes into this, that, the other stock, or if you don't trust me as an average taxpayer to do that, give me a choice of investment funds, maybe the S&P 500 index, whatever it is, but I control where this thing is going. If you let politicians control it, then all of a sudden the incentive behind the choices being made are no longer get me the best return. It's now get me the most votes, get me the most power. And that's a recipe for abysmal returns.
Help me enrich my friends in the business world who will then enrich me after I leave office.
Yeah.
And in the end, the word that you didn't use that I was waiting for was consequences. If individuals direct their own retirement fund, and they make bad choices, they individually suffer the consequences. When the government makes bad choices, those consequences are spread over every last one of us.
Right. We live with them. So if I'm going to live with the consequences anyway, let me have the choice.
Yeah. No, this could be a disaster in the making. If it's not a disaster in the making, it's still a terrible idea and a god-awful precedent.
It is terrible. And let me go back to that unfortunately antiquated document, the Constitution. The federal government is allowed to do the things listed in the Constitution, and purchasing stock in a private sector company is not one of the items.
Having read the Constitution, I can verify what you've just said, and I would like to subscribe to your newsletter. Which brings us, unfortunately, well, you go ahead and tell us what you would like.
I have one more thing, and that is we have a long history in this country of drawing a bright line between church and state. And we all know as children, we know the mantra of separation of church and state. I claim that there's another separation that we don't pay nearly enough attention to and we should hold as sacrosanct, and that is the separation of the economy and the state. The government has no business touching anything in the economy.
And before our well-educated listeners start sending hate mail, the separation of church and state does not exist as such in the Constitution. It is a constitutional tradition emanating from the 2 religious clauses in the First Amendment. So keep it to yourselves. This, of course, brings us to so what?
So what?
This is a tough one. right? It was all fun and games telling Michael Jensen to be nice and have decent conversations with people he disagrees with. But the government has just stuck its big fat thumb into the economy in a way that it really hasn't before. So
I don't have a good so what. I have the one answer that you've already thrown out that I think people are going to find unappealing, and that is you catch a company doing this, you stop buying their products. And
there's that.
It sounds trite, but I tell you, companies really care.
It's not trite. It's not trite by a long shot. And the other thing you can do is be obnoxious about it. You got a Twitter account? Go nuts.
Right, sure.
Right? People in government, they may not pay attention to your individual tweets or whatever we call tweets now, but they pay attention to aggregations of these things. And when they see that public sentiment is clearly on the other side of an issue, they change course.
Yeah, and James, I think you're onto something even better, because look at all of the many examples we have of people who've been wronged by a company, they got ripped off or whatever it is. And what do now? We go to Twitter, we go to Facebook, we post something. And that's what happens is immediately the company that was ignoring you up to that point now is falling all over itself trying to make things right. So do that. Point out.
It's the only way I've ever gotten customer service from American Airlines.
Right. Exactly. Take to Twitter, take to Facebook, and call out Intel for this nonsense.
Maybe next week we can talk about your beloved Southwest, who just changed a policy on big, giant, fat people. Now they're making them buy 2 seats.
I saw that, yeah. I'm not quite sure how I feel about that.
Having had to move from seats because, and look, I am not a small man. I'm not. I weigh 210 pounds. I fill exactly an airline seat. And I got to my seat once, and the guy in the middle seat of all places was easily 450 pounds. And he took up half my seat, but I didn't have half to give.
How did you two work this
out?
I
don't. I paid for this vertical space right here. So I would like to maybe talk about that in the future, because being that big is choice of sorts.
Not always, but sometimes.
No, almost always. Almost always. So not always, you're right, but almost.
Words and Numbers is a Civil original podcast. We work with Civil to advance their mission of upgrading civilization by exploring ideas that promote civic equality and cooperation. We believe the most pressing issues humans face, war, poverty, debt, tribalism, arise from coercive institutions that bring out the worst in us. We at Civil look to voluntary solutions to these and other problems. We invite you to explore Civil's new platform at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.
Anyway, that's the end of our official episode today. And Ant, I don't know if you were in on this Twitter thread, but somebody asked me if you enjoyed smoking cigars with me.
Are you going to tell the story?
Yes, I am. Yes, I absolutely am. Because there are some people out there who have not heard this. One day, Ant does not enjoy tobacco in any of its forms, which, I don't know, makes him kind of a girly man in my opinion, but my opinion doesn't mean much here, I guess. Anyway, he doesn't enjoy tobacco products, but he was watching the TV show, the BBC version of Sherlock, which I thought was a great show too. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Sherlock Holmes does to think better is he gets some nicotine into his system. And Ant thought, perhaps I could be a little smarter if I had some nicotine in my system. And
let me back up. I didn't just say that. I questioned you about it. And you assured me that, yes, nicotine increases the whatever it is in the brain and
blood flow to the brain. Yeah,
clearly.
You feel, oh, God, it's like a miracle drug, right? And Ant and I were on this very long, I think, 6-hour car ride from one place to another. And I had quit smoking cigarettes, but I was still sucking on nicotine lozenges from the Walmart.
Sucking on them. You were like downing them.
Oh, man. Aunt, I used to sleep with 2 in my mouth, right? I was addicted to nicotine, something awful. You'll all be happy to know that addiction is now broken. But I gave Aunt 1 nicotine tablet so we could find out if he could maybe be smarter, which, that would be better for all of us. Let's just be honest. And he started saying things like, geez, James, I don't feel so good. And then he started turning green. And then he looked at me. We're about an hour away from where we lived at the time, and we're just about to stop at this world-class barbecue place to get some food. And Aunt said, I don't think I can eat any food. And I'm like, you son of a bitch, I want barbecue. and then he looked at me, and he pulled the car over, and he said, I can't do this anymore. And he spat out the nicotine tablet, and he got into the passenger seat and twitched for the next hour as I drove him to his house. Whereupon he went inside. Keep in mind, I haven't been dropped off at my house. I'm in Aunt's car.
I couldn't even manage that.
And you can't even drive me home. We lived 8 miles apart. And I dropped him off, and he just kind of wandered in, leaving me to carry his suitcase, and fell down on his bed where he remained for 25 hours.
My son had to drive you home, as I recall.
That's right. Aunt, I want you to tell the people if I have lied or exaggerated any of the claims I have made here today.
It was way worse than what you have described.
Tell us how much worse it was, Aunt.
I've had several bouts of kidney stones, which anyone who's had kidney stones knows how hellaciously painful they are. I'd go through one of those a week if it was a choice between that and having another nicotine tablet. That thing, I wanted to die. I couldn't die, James. I was so sad.
And I was eating 40 or so a day.
What you don't know, you were in the car when we got to my house. I walk into the house and I'm doubled over. My son is sitting there on the couch. I can't even stand up straight. I just kind of waddle by him and say, James, car, drive. And we went upstairs and just fell over on the bed. And you're correct. I was there for 25 hours.
I was literally eating 30 or 40 of those a day.
Woof. And by the way, to go back to the original point, if it had any efficacious effect on my thinking, I have no idea what that was. Other than I came to the crystal clear conclusion I should never do that again.
Yeah, Aunt walked into the house crouched over like a fentanyl addict. So, unfortunately, Aunt will never, I think, have a cigar with me, but so it goes. I did want to mention to the people who are listening who are maybe new to us and who have stayed through this long story, that in the Words and Numbers Backstage Facebook group, which you can all join, I do occasionally cigars with James where I just go outside, smoke a couple of cigars, and hang out online. And I think I'm going to do it this week. If not, it's about every other week or so. So come on over, join us, have a cigar with me, and you don't really have to have a cigar. You can just hang.
Thank God.
See you next time, Aunt.
See you next time, James.
Oh, and you know what? Be nice to each other. Catch you later.